Remember to like and subscribe. Welcome to Sound of a Swish. We're diving deep into the life of James Naismith today.
The inventor of basketball.
You got it. We're going beyond the peach baskets and bouncing balls.
Using his biography, James Naismith, the man who invented basketball.
Exactly. To uncover some surprising insights into his character, motivations,
And lasting impact.
It's amazing how much we think we know about Naismith.
Yet, there are so many fascinating details that often get overlooked.
Like, did you know that Naismith wasn't some kid from the city who grew up dribbling a basketball?
Right. He was actually raised on a farm in Canada.
A far cry from the hardwood courts.
His early life was far from idyllic,
He faced hardships.
including the loss of both his parents by the age of 12.
Wow.
Those experiences really seem to have shaped his strong moral compass.
And his deep sense of personal responsibility.
Qualities that are evident throughout his life and work.
It's almost like a classic hero's origin story.
Overcoming adversity to achieve great things.
But here's a twist. Before diving into athletics, Naismith seriously considered becoming a minister.
Can you imagine? Pastor Naismith instead of the inventor of basketball.
It's mind-blowing to think about those alternate paths.
But even though he moved away from the ministry, his commitment to ethical conduct and personal development remained constant.
So how did this farm-strong, morally grounded young man end up at McGill University?
Well, his uncle Peter played a key role.
Encouraging him to pursue higher education.
Yeah, and offering financial support in exchange for help on the farm.
Sounds like a fair trade.
Naismith's dedication to learning is clear.
Despite having never set foot in a gym before.
He excelled in physical activities at McGill.
Especially those requiring strength, like climbing in parallel bars.
Right.
Sounds like he was a natural athlete.
But McGill wasn't all books and lectures, was it?
I bet not. What was student life like back then?
This is where his love for rugby comes in.
Rugby.
He joined the McGill team and played for 6 years straight, never missing a game.
Talk about commitment.
I heard he even had a pretty dramatic entry onto the team.
Oh, do tell.
During a practice, the team center broke his nose and they needed a replacement immediately.
Ouch.
Naismith, who happened to be watching, volunteered, borrowed a uniform.
And the rest is history.
You got it.
It sounds like he really thrived in that team environment.
He did.
But how did he reconcile his passion for sports with his initial aspirations to become a minister? Wasn't there a bit of tension there?
You're right. At the time, athletics were often seen as, shall we say, ungodly.
Ungodly, really.
Some fellow students even prayed for his soul.
I can only imagine the side-eye he must have gotten.
It seems Naismith didn't see a conflict between his faith and his love of rugby, though.
So how did he square those two parts of himself?
He firmly believed that sports could build character and teach important life lessons.
It's all about the values.
And there's a specific incident that really solidified this belief for him.
Huh. Tell me more.
A rival team's captain instructed his players to go easy on an injured McGill quarterback.
Wow. What a display of sportsmanship.
This act deeply moved Naismith and reinforced his conviction that sports could be a force for good.
It's incredible how these seemingly small moments can have such a profound impact.
They really can.
But if he felt so strongly about the positive aspects of sports, what ultimately led him away from the ministry and into the world of physical education?
It was a gradual shift.
A change of heart?
But witnessing the power of sportsmanship to inspire even the most unruly players played a significant role.
He saw the potential.
Naismith began to believe that he could make a greater difference through athletics than by preaching from a pulpit.
Finding his true calling.
Exactly.
So how did this rugby-loving, morally grounded athlete go from the fields of McGill to inventing basketball at the YMCA training school in Springfield, Massachusetts?
It was a combination of circumstance and ingenuity.
A perfect storm.
Naismith wasn't specifically hired to invent a new sport.
He had other duties.
He was a graduate student at the school now known as Springfield College. And they needed someone to teach a particularly challenging gym class.
I'm picturing a bunch of rowdy students stuck indoors during a New England winter.
You're spot on. These students were known for being difficult to engage.
A tough crowd.
And Naismith was given 2 weeks to come up with a new indoor game that would keep them active and interested.
2 weeks? That's not a lot of time.
He tried everything, even bringing in lacrosse sticks.
Lacrosse indoors. That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It was. Imagine lacrosse indoors. It was a disaster.
I bet. So, with time running out and options dwindling, how did he finally crack the code and invent basketball?
It's fascinating how he drew inspiration from both his athletic background and a simple childhood game.
a light bulb moment.
He was struggling to find a suitable activity when he started reflecting on his experiences with rugby and other sports.
Looking for inspiration.
He realized that the most engaging games often involve trying to hit a target.
Makes sense.
He also knew it couldn't be too easy or too difficult.
Finding that sweet spot.
And it had to encourage teamwork while discouraging rough play.
A delicate balance.
And that's when he remembered a childhood game called Duck on a Rock, where the objective was to knock a small object off a perch by throwing stones at it.
Interesting.
This sparked an idea.
The birth of basketball.
He nailed 2 peach baskets to the balcony railing at opposite ends of the gym, grabbed a soccer ball, and voila.
From peach baskets to a global phenomena.
It's amazing how such a simple idea could take off like that.
It really speaks to the power of innovation and observation.
Right. But the early days of basketball were far from the polished game we know today.
I'm picturing that dimly lit gym with peach baskets for hoops and no markings on the floor.
It was quite a sight. Naismith didn't initially create a formal rule book, just some basic guidelines.
So how was the game even played?
As the game gained popularity at Springfield and beyond, the rules evolved organically.
Trial and error.
For instance, the first game had 9 players on each side.
9 players on each side. Talk about chaos.
It was a different era. Eventually, the number of players was reduced to the 5 we know today.
I can see why that change was necessary.
And get this, in the early days, the penalty for a foul was to sit out until the next goal was made.
Seriously, that could mean sitting out for a long time if your team wasn't scoring.
Exactly. The free throw system was eventually adopted to address that issue.
It's amazing how the game has evolved over time.
It's fascinating to see how trial and error shaped the game's development.
It really makes you appreciate how far basketball has come.
It does.
But I have to ask, was Naismith as obsessed with the game as we are today?
Surprisingly, no.
Really?
He only played basketball twice in his entire life.
Wait, the man who invented basketball barely even played it.
It's true. Naismith's passions extended far beyond the basketball court.
A Renaissance man.
He loved woodworking, wrestling, and even pioneered the use of the football helmet.
So diverse.
He saw sports as a vital part of holistic development, not just a path to fame and fortune.
That really puts things into perspective.
It seems like he was a true Renaissance man, always curious and engaged in a variety of pursuits.
Absolutely. And this multifaceted nature of Naismith's personality is key to understanding his approach to life, his work.
And even his invention of basketball.
So we've covered his upbringing, his time at McGill, and the invention of basketball at Springfield.
Right.
But what about his journey to the University of Kansas? That's where the story gets even more interesting.
Oh, absolutely. His time at KU was a pivotal chapter, not only for Naismith personally, but also for the evolution of basketball.
Stay tuned, because we're about to delve into the dynamics between Naismith and the legendary Phog Allen.
And explore some of the lesser-known aspects of Naismith's life beyond the court.
Welcome back to Sound of a Swish. Before the break, we were talking about Naismith's move to the University of Kansas.
In 1898.
Right. A fascinating period.
Especially considering the landscape of basketball back then.
Totally different from today.
It wasn't the huge competitive sport we know today.
So, what was Naismith's role at KU? Was he brought in as the head basketball coach?
Not exactly. He was appointed as the chapel director and head of the newly formed Department of Physical Education.
Chapel director.
Yeah.
And head of physical education. Sounds like quite the multitasker.
Indeed. And that's not all.
What else?
He also taught mandatory freshman hygiene classes.
Hygiene classes.
And oversaw the entire athletics department.
Wow, he had a lot on his plate. So where did basketball fit into all of this?
Interestingly, basketball wasn't a priority at Kansas when Naismith arrived.
Really?
It was considered a sissy game.
The sissy game.
With some women having tried it, but not the men.
How times have changed.
It's amazing how perceptions of masculinity in sports have evolved over time.
Naismith really had his work cut out for him, introducing the sport to a skeptical audience.
Absolutely. He started by incorporating basketball into his physical education classes.
Smart.
And eventually formed an intramural league.
Baby steps.
The first official Kansas men's basketball game took place in 1899.
Against who?
Against the Kansas City YMCA.
Oh,
and they lost 16-5.
Ouch. Well, nobody's perfect. I doubt those early Kansas teams were filled with future NBA stars.
You're right about that. However, there was one player who stood out, a name familiar to any Jayhawk fan, Phog Allen.
Now things are getting interesting.
Right.
What was their relationship like?
Especially considering their differing views on the game. It was a classic clash of philosophies.
In what way?
Naismith, as we discussed, believed in sportsmanship, teamwork,
Fundamental.
and personal development above all else.
Winning wasn't everything.
Winning was secondary.
Right.
Allen, on the other hand, was a fierce competitor, driven to push his players to their limits and win.
Two very different approaches.
How did these two contrasting personalities manage to coexist at KU?
Did Naismith attempt to temper Allen's competitive spirit?
It's more nuanced than that.
How so?
Remember, Naismith had a wide range of responsibilities at the university,
Right, he wasn't just the basketball coach.
including promoting basketball on a national and even international level.
A busy man.
This left him with limited time to micromanage coaches or players.
So he wasn't focused on controlling every detail of the basketball program.
Exactly. There's even a famous anecdote, though some debate its authenticity,
That's the anecdote.
where Allen supposedly asked Naismith to be the assistant coach, and Naismith's response, "You can't coach basketball, you just play it."
Classic Naismith.
It highlights their fundamental differences.
Totally different mindsets.
Allen, even as a player, was already thinking like a coach, analyzing strategies, and obsessing over victory.
Wow.
Naismith, on the other hand, saw the beauty in the simplicity of the game.
It's fascinating how their contrasting personalities shape the future of basketball at KU.
It really is.
But before we dive into that, I'm curious about Naismith's life beyond basketball.
Okay.
What other passions did he pursue during his time in Kansas?
Naismith was a man of many interests.
Okay.
He introduced a variety of sports to KU,
Such as
including wrestling, fencing, lacrosse, and even golf.
golf. I never pictured Naismith on the green.
It might seem surprising, but it aligns with his commitment to promoting physical activity and well-being among students and faculty.
It sounds like his heart was always with the students.
Absolutely. He was deeply invested in their development and believed in the transformative power of sports.
He sounds like an amazing educator.
He took particular pride in his work with intramural athletics,
Intramurals.
which allowed students of all skill levels to participate and experience the benefits of physical activity.
That's truly inspiring.
He wasn't solely focused on creating elite athletes,
Right.
but wanted everyone to have the opportunity to play and grow through sports.
Precisely.
And this philosophy extended beyond the physical realm.
In what way?
He was a devoted family man, an active member of his church,
Wow.
and even taught Sunday school.
It's amazing how he balanced all these roles and passions.
It is.
But it seems his life took an unexpected turn in the early 1900s.
You're referring to his involvement in the events along the U.S.-Mexico border in 1916.
Yes. What was that all about?
It's a lesser-known chapter in Naismith's life,
Okay.
but incredibly fascinating. Tensions were high between the U.S. and Mexico,
It's a turbulent time.
with fears of war looming.
Oh.
The U.S. Army was mobilized along the border, and Naismith, being a chaplain with the Kansas National Guard, was called to serve.
So he went from coaching basketball to serving on the front lines.
It was a dramatic shift, to say the least. He was stationed at Camp Eagle Pass in Texas,
Doing what?
providing spiritual guidance and support to the soldiers.
But I'm guessing he couldn't resist bringing a bit of basketball to the troops.
You know Naismith. He saw basketball as a way to boost morale and keep the soldiers occupied.
Makes sense.
He even designed a unique outdoor court for the camp,
What was it like?
oval-shaped with goals positioned further inside the edges to
Interesting.
keep the ball in play and minimize interruptions.
Always the innovator.
Yeah.
So he was serving as a chaplain, organizing basketball games. What else was he up to during his time on the border?
He also addressed social issues impacting the soldiers.
Such as?
There was a problem with prostitution in the nearby town,
Oh, no.
which deeply concerned Naismith.
Understandably.
He saw it as a threat to the troops' health and morale
Right.
and launched a campaign to shut those establishments down.
He didn't shy away from tackling tough issues.
It's another example of his strong moral compass.
Absolutely.
He saw a wrong that needed to be corrected and took action.
Good for him.
He also gave speeches to the soldiers,
About what?
emphasizing the importance of preventing sexually transmitted diseases.
He was a man of principle, that's for sure.
He was.
How long did he serve on the border?
About 4 months,
then?
and it seems to have had a profound impact on him.
In what way?
Then, in 1917, the United States entered World War I.
Leading to another dramatic shift in Naismith's life.
It did.
Welcome back to Sound of a Swish. Before the break, we were talking about Naismith being called to serve in World War I.
Imagine the shift from the basketball courts of Kansas to the battlefields of Europe.
Talk about a culture shock.
A completely different world for him.
What was his role in the war effort?
He spent nearly 2 years in France,
Doing what?
working with the YMCA to support the troops.
Yeah.
His focus was on providing a sense of normalcy and comfort
Amidst all the chaos?
amidst the chaos of war, exactly.
Right.
He wasn't fighting on the front lines,
What?
but he witnessed firsthand the horrors of war
Okay.
and the toll it took on the young men serving their country,
I bet that was incredibly challenging.
both physically and emotionally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But Naismith faced this new challenge with the same compassion and dedication he brought to everything else.
It sounds like he had a really big heart.
He did.
So what did he actually do?
He organized recreational activities,
Okay.
led religious services, and offered a listening ear to those struggling with fear, homesickness, and trauma.
Providing comfort and support.
Exactly.
Now, did he manage to bring basketball to the war front?
Of course, he saw it as a way to boost morale
Makes sense.
and provide a much-needed distraction for the soldiers.
Right. He helped organize games and tournaments among the troops.
Bringing a bit of home to the front lines.
Yeah, and demonstrating the game's ability to transcend boundaries and create a sense of unity and camaraderie.
It really is a universal language, isn't it?
It is.
After the war ended, Naismith returned to Kansas.
Where basketball was gaining serious momentum.
I bet.
You're right. The game had exploded in popularity during his absence.
I can only imagine.
However, his return to KU wasn't without its challenges.
Oh.
He found himself once again at odds with Fogg Allen, now firmly established as the head basketball coach.
Right. Those two were like oil and water when it came to their views on basketball.
What was the source of their conflict this time?
Yeah.
Allen was focused on building a powerhouse program at Kansas,
Winning championships.
prioritizing winning championships and developing elite players.
Makes sense.
Naismith, while happy about the game's growth, wasn't entirely comfortable with this direction.
I imagine he saw it as a departure from his original vision for the sport. Precisely. He was concerned about the growing commercialization of basketball and the emphasis on winning at all costs.
Yeah.
He worried that the pursuit of money and fame would corrupt the essence of the game,
Which he believed should be about.
which he believed should be about sportsmanship, personal growth, and the joy of playing.
It's a tension that still exists in sports today.
It does.
How did Naismith navigate this changing landscape?
He remained a respected figure in the basketball world and continued to advocate for the values he held dear.
Did he ever express any regret or resentment about the direction basketball was taking?
On the contrary, he remained remarkably humble about his contribution to the game.
Really?
He never sought fame or fortune from basketball and was content knowing he'd created something that brought joy and opportunity to millions worldwide.
I love that.
It must have been gratifying to witness his creation take on a life of its own.
Absolutely.
And one of the most significant moments of his life came in 1936, when basketball was officially included in the Olympic Games for the first time.
Wow, what a moment.
He and his wife, Maud, traveled to Berlin
To witness the game.
to witness this historic event, a true testament to the global reach of basketball and the power of sport to unite nations.
What an incredible experience for him.
Naismith was honored by athletes from all over the world and even had the privilege of tossing up the ball for the opening game of the Olympic basketball tournament.
Wow.
A fitting tribute to the man who invented the game just 45 years earlier.
His story is truly inspiring. From a small Canadian farm to the inventor of a global sport.
James Naismith's life was full of purpose and adventure.
It reminds us that sometimes the simplest ideas can have the most profound impact.
Naismith's legacy extends beyond the game of basketball, touching countless lives with his kindness, integrity, and belief in the power of sport to make the world a better place.
Well said. And that wraps up another episode of Sound of a Swish. Remember to like and subscribe. Until next time, keep exploring the fascinating world of basketball.